We ready to go, Stevie? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to get started with the committee of the whole meeting, please. If the board members could please make sure you have your microphones on. We ready, Noah? Okay, good evening. It is 7:02 p.m. on Monday, October 27th, 2025. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the whole meeting. Can we have a roll call for the committee, please?
Yes. Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Whitehead?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Naratsu?
Here.
Trustee Kahuli?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
President Garvey?
Here.
And Norred filling in as Deputy Village Clerk.
Thank you, everybody. And for those of you that weren't here earlier, we had a board meeting where there was a chance for general public comment. We have a committee of the whole agenda. At the end of the meeting, before we go into executive sessions, there's a chance for public comment. But my intention is, as we go through each topic, specifically the first topic, we're going to have a staff presentation, and I will then, if there's anyone here that's to comment, would like to make public comment about that topic, I will go through side by side and have people come up and make comments at that point. I think the board members would like to hear your comments and input, and then I'll let the board discuss it as we typically do. And then again, at the end of the meeting, there will be a chance for more public comment, just so you know. Okay. So the first item is a continued discussion regarding the Rental Registration Ordinance. We've discussed this at various levels, including the Economic Development Commission and previous committee of the whole meetings. I think the board asked for more information, and so we put it back up for tonight. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to and we have a very detailed memo in our board that summarizes the issue and some of the changes and information from staff, but I'm going to ask Libby Popovic, our Economic Development Director, to provide an additional presentation tonight to the board. So thank you, Libby.
Thank you, President Garvey. As you illustrated at the last board meeting, Deanne initially presented the proposal for a rental registration, and there were some additional questions. So it's just a preview. The benefits of having a rental registration in Brookfield is the public health and safety, enforcement of certain code enforcement standards, and then accountability and communication, including Brookfield having a reliable database and also having current information on ownership. So last time we didn't include this information, but this board did ask, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but Cook County has a number of rental registrations that have already been passed. These are either rental registration licenses or other types of rental registration that has been implemented. So Brookfield will certainly not be the first one or the last one. And for frame of reference, there are also in DuPage County, there are 12 municipalities, Addison, Aurora, Bloomingdale, Bensonville, Carroll Stream, Glendale Heights, Hanover Park, Oak Brook Terrace, West Chicago, Wooddale, Woodridge, and Darien that have also implemented some version of a rental registration ordinance. So I just wanted to preface it with that, since that was additional information that this board was seeking. Housing units. Brookfield has approximately 20.5% rental units currently. We don't have a precise number of the actual units. CMAP from 2023 tells us about 1,500. We did go back and ask GIS, through the GIS, to look at which rental units we might have. The number came back as 2,000. That might be a slightly inflated number because it might include certain businesses as well and not necessarily single-family residences. About 20 to 25% are 2 to 4 units, and these are approximate numbers because we don't have a strong database to support this. Approximately 10 to 15% would be 5+ units, and about 65% are single-family residences in Brookfield. We estimate that approximately 400 to 700 rental buildings are in Brookfield. Could be on the lower end of 400, it could be on the higher end of 700. So when we look at our neighbors around us, we have Riverside, Oak Park, and North Riverside, who have all implemented some version of rental registration. We went through this last time. Riverside has annual inspections of exterior and common areas, and interior units are inspected every 3 years. Oak Park has registration for units that are 4+. It's $20 per unit, not per building. And there's biennial inspections for the exterior, common areas, and interior units. They also do random interior inspections, basically dividing it into a third every 3 years. And then North Riverside as well has the registration requirement for single and multifamily properties. So the proposal here for Brookfield, which we did take to the Economic Development Commission, as you noted, and the Economic Development Commission was unanimously in favor of implementing it without any fees, but just the registration. Staff recommendation is to implement it with some nominal administrative fees. So the proposal is to have an annual registration, $125 administrative fee for single family and 1 to 4 units, $225 for administrative fee for 5+ units, annual inspections of common areas, random in-unit inspections once every 3 years. So for that, we're trying to balance kind of the landlords and owners' rights against the health and public safety and code enforcement. So we're mirroring similarly to what Oak Park and other Cook County municipalities have implemented. Recommendation is to have an exemption for 3 years for new developments after the certificate of occupancy has been applied for. The timeline would be January 1st of 2026 with a renewal due by March of each year. And the registration and inspection database would be maintained in our new cloud-based cloud permit platform. Oh, yes, as additional reminder, and I do have this in the staff memo, the EDC recommended having the rental registration but without any inspections or the fees, which is in the memo. So the inspection framework, and this is the additional information that this board has requested as well, is common area maintenance would be conducted annually on the 2+ buildings. In-unit inspections would be conducted every 3 years. Inspection reports would outline any violations, and re-inspections would be scheduled within 30 days if there are any violations. And then inspections would be conducted by our in person by our full-time inspector, and then any contracted inspectors through BNF or a similar agency, as we are now doing for property maintenance and code enforcement. And then any continued noncompliance would lead to additional adjudication or suspension or occupancy restrictions. And with that, I will open it up to additional questions.
Thank you, Libby. And I guess originally my intention was to open it up for public comment, but would the board like to have a chance to question staff or clarify any of this, or would you like me to go to public comment and then you discuss? I'm open to whatever you want.
I had 2 questions, just to I think the first screen there. The number of units. So how many buildings are we talking? The 400 to 700?
Well, we don't have those numbers. So these are just estimates from some of the numbers that we were able to
Which number
run.
should we be looking at? The 400 to 700
400
in
to
terms of the number
700.
of buildings, or the 1,500 to 2,000 as the number of buildings?
400 to 700 buildings. So it could be as low as 400. It could be lower than 400, really, and as high as 700. So that's just an estimate.
Okay, and what we don't know is, of those, how many are 2-unit, how many are 5-unit,
That's
et cetera?
exactly correct. Yes.
Okay. And what is a random 3-year inspection? What does
So
that?
those, instead of inspecting every single unit, there would be an inspection a rolling inspection every 3 years. So we're not inspecting all of the units every 3 years. It would be periodic inspections for certain units in a 3-year cycle.
So not so much 1 unit within each building, just a random
Correct.
building chosen.
Right. No, it wouldn't be a random building chosen. If there are, for example, 400 buildings, it would be divided by 3 years. So annual inspections of common area maintenance, so that's annually, every single year of the building. We would divide the 400 buildings within a 3-year cycle, which gives you about 133 per year. And then within that, there would be certain units within that building that would be picked, just a periodic inspection, like a rotating inspection.
But
So
not
you're
all the
not every
units,
single-
not all the units within that particular building?
Correct, unless this board directs otherwise.
I had a question about the kind of the safety and common area inspection. Oak Park has an exterior and common area inspection, and we're just recommending common area. I know a lot of our buildings have stairs and porches and like some exterior components. Is there a reason we wouldn't also?
No, exterior would be included with that.
Okay, thank you.
About the fee structure, is the intent that the fee would cover the cost of the inspection?
Right,
Or
the
do we feel
administrative
like
fee.
that fee structure would make this program revenue neutral?
It absolutely, if not a negative. So it's a very nominal fee just to cover the inspections themselves, maintaining all the administrative sides of it, then doing the re-inspections, and then maintaining, all the paperwork moving forward and cycling through it.
Maybe you include a little bit of information in the memo about some of the data from other communities and what their inspections find. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Specific to,
Your discussions with Riverside and North Riverside about their non-compliance issues?
oh, yes, thank you for that reminder. So one of the instructions was to reach out to the other municipalities to find out, are more of the code compliance issues on the exterior or interior? So from Riverside and North Riverside, it was about 50-50 exterior and interior. And then we did also go through our own files to look through it and talk to both inspectors, and it's about a 50-50, half out exterior, half interior. We did not have much success with Oak Park.
Maybe just to, I mean, you mentioned it to clarify it, but I had a couple of the Economic Development Commission members come up to me this past weekend, pointing out what their position was on this. And as you mentioned, they supported a registration for rental units.
Yes.
They did not support any fees for that. They did not support any inspections for that. We talked about that quite a bit at the last meeting, too, some of the reservations they had with going forward with that.
Right, and as illustrated in the staff memo, that is reflected within the staff memo, that the commissioners themselves recommended simply having a registration.
Right.
As staff reviewed it and looked at other municipalities, we haven't found a single municipality that waives that fee completely, not within Cook County, DuPage County, or Will County.
With that larger sample of communities that have registration ordinances in place, do we know what their inspection structure is? Is it similar to what's being proposed here? Do some communities have a complaint-based structure? I know we talk about in more detail about Riverside, Oak Park, and North Riverside. I'm just curious, like, how common is this approach to the inspections of the common areas and the inspections in unit, or did we just look at whether or not you have a registration ordinance
Right.
on the books?
We did not recreate the wheel on this. We basically looked at all the other municipalities. For example, Oak Park has the residential rental license. Riverside has registration and annual inspections. Evanston has annual rental registration by ordinance. Skokie has village required rental unit registration and inspections. Niles, for example, has licenses required for all residential rental properties. So it's kind of it's a cross-section across the board. Some do all units every year. Some do a rotating every 2 years. We recommended 3 years because we're trying to find that balance between public safety and code compliance, but also not being too invasive with landlords and trying to actually have this where it's a workable tool for both landlords and the village itself.
Explain a little bit about with the rolling in-unit inspections every 3 years. Is it a random in-unit? And is it by the?
Sure. Well, we would put it in the system. So for example, if it's a 5-unit building and, their inspection is due in year 1, we would contact the landlord to let them know we're going to be, we're going to be doing the inspection on unit 1A, for example. So that way they can notify the tenant and we can respect those rights and have those safeguards in place for that. We wouldn't just show up and say, we're doing unit 6 or 5. So that's
Noted so that they don't get.
yes, so we would, and the beauty of it is we can keep everything within Cloud Permit to keep all those notes, so that way when the second cycle comes through in 3 years, we're able to note that and then look at different units.
And can you explain what, and some people here may be interested, curious as well, what does an in-unit inspection include?
It's the standard inspection that would include for life safety issues. So it would include smoke and carbon detectors, ingress and egress and fire safety, electrical, plumbing, structural safety. So the inspection itself has to be, it's conditioned on being a reasonable standard inspection, so it would be always the same type of inspection with a checklist, which then we would update. The inspectors will all have the same list that they're going to work off of. It's very limited in scope, so this isn't, this isn't something that falls within a search and a seizure, for example. This is an inspection for life safety issues, and it's very narrowly tailored to that specific role. So anything that would fail, say there's no smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors, within 30 days, the owner would have an opportunity to fix it.
Is that consistent with what we do for resale inspections?
We don't have resale inspections for any single-family residences, only for commercial buildings. So it would be a similar type of inspection list, though, so yes.
So right now, currently, we don't perform any inspections on rental units,
Not on all of them, no.
only if there are complaints?
Correct. Correct. Just if it's part of a regular, cycle of code enforcement or property maintenance.
If there's not any other questions from the board right now, I would like to open it up to public comment, and then obviously we can come back and have board comment on this. There's no vote to be taken tonight. This is not an item that's up for a vote. We wanted to get additional staff input and public comment. The board would not be voting on anything tonight, so if the board is okay, I will open it up to public comment. So what I'm going to ask is, I'll go to this side first. Anyone that wants to speak, sir, I know you were here first and you got a harness on, so come on up. I'm going to ask you to just, I've had one of those, so I know. Rotator cuff?
How are you?
Was it rotator cuff or?
Rotator cuff.
Then they're done that. I'm just going to ask everyone to just state your name for the record.
Yeah, sure. Good evening. My name is Lou Arzison, and I am a Brookfield housing provider. I'm speaking today to voice my opposition to the proposed rental registration ordinance. While I understand the intent of this committee is to improve safety, this proposal raises numerous concerns for me and my fellow housing providers. First, there is no demonstrated evidence of a safety crisis in our village that warrants new regulation. I've studied the committee item memo, and it concedes the program's financial impact and number of affecting buildings and units remain unknown. Is it responsible policy to adopt an ordinance with no cost analysis or clear problem statement? Second, the proposal includes random in-unit inspections. This is a direct invasion of tenant privacy and contradicts Supreme Court precedent, Camara v. Municipal Court, 1967, which requires tenant consent or an obtained warrant. Are we as a village willing to consume our legal resources after our citizens who deny entry? Third, the memo envisions a bureaucracy involving cloud permitting systems, annual common area inspections, random interior inspections, re-inspections, and fines up to $750. This is a massive administrative expansion for a village of our size. Even if outsourced, every missed appointment, follow-up, and appeal adds costs that will fall onto landlords and eventually onto our tenants. Fourth, the memo claims that the ordinance will help establish a reliable database of rental properties. But isn't that public record through Cook County Assessor and Recorder of Deeds? Isn't it public record through our village water department? How does creating a redundant database with new fees add public value to Brookfield? Finally, the memo cites neighboring towns like Riverside, North Riverside, and Oak Park that have similar ordinances. Why can't any of these villages cite improved safety outcome data from these programs? Brookfield already has compliant-based inspections, code enforcement, and resale inspections for multifamilies. We should not subjugate responsible landlords and their tenants to routine government intrusion. I sincerely urge this committee to pause this initiative until it can demonstrate a real safety problem, outline a financial plan, put forth a legally defensible inspection process, and produce evidence-based data of improved safety outcome. Thank you all for your consideration, and if you don't mind, I'd like to approach to leave these
Sure.
with you.
Do you have multiple copies?
I do.
If you could just go to Trustee Gahuli, she can pass them down. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for your comments. Who else on this side? Sir, in the blue, or black jacket? Sorry, it's sort of hard to see from up here when,
My name's Robert Consul. I actually live in LaGrange Park, but I lived in Brookfield for about 10 years before I moved to LaGrange Park. So I'm here to speak against the proposed rental registration ordinance. I've been the owner of a 6-unit building in Brookfield for 47 years and the owner of a 2-unit building for 36 years. In all these years, I've maintained both properties to the highest standards. 6 of my 8 current residents have been renting from me for 9 years or more. The reason for this is I keep my rents reasonable, make improvements at a considerable cost to myself. In addition to these cost improvements, I've had to deal with continuing rising real estate taxes, utility costs, and insurance, to name a few. For example, for my 6th flat, I spent close to $89,000 in building improvements since 2015, and they are not cheap. The major ones were a new boiler, hot water tank, sidewalks, hall carpeting, floor tile, apartment upgrades, and most recently, $12,000 for removal of a buried oil tank in 2021, and $42,000 this year for new electrical service of the building and installation of circuit breakers. These last 2 items were paid for by a HELOC on my own home. In addition, in 2024, I'll be paying close to $20,000 in real estate taxes for the 6th flat and $8,100 for my 2 flat. I view this as an additional unnecessary administrative and financial burden. I hate to say it, but almost nickel and diming an issue like another means to squeeze more money out of owners to fill the village's coffers when I am paying huge amounts of money to keep my property in excellent condition and continuing paying escalating real estate taxes for which the village already sees between 20 and 25% share based on what building it is of my tax bill, $6,000 in 2023 for both properties. As proposed, I'd be required to spend $125 for my 2 flat and $225 for my 6 flat, or $350 more per year. I believe that the $6,000 plus I am currently paying via real estate taxes should be more than enough to cover this should this be passed. I also view this proposed ordinance as another burden, not only on myself, but also as an invasion of privacy to my residents. I ask, how are you going to schedule inspections of residents' apartments? What are you going to do if they refuse? Are you going to fine them? I do not enter an apartment unless I get their permission. It is also not my responsibility or right to let anyone in their apartment that they do not want to be there. Also, as proposed, there is no verbiage as to what specifically is being inspected. As it stands right now, it is very subjective based on the whim of an inspector. And what are the inspector's credentials? Do they have a professional PE license or anything? And regarding code enforcement, if there was a true problem, it should be a case-by-case situation based on complaints from the residents, as they would be the ones noticing problems within or outside of a property and would want them fixed. You cannot lump every owner into the same category. I have no intention of selling either of these 2 properties, and I am aware that if I do, inspections are required prior to selling. And I believe this is the time to catch issues and make sure they are corrected before being sold to a new owner. Even though Riverside, Oak Park, and North Riverside have imposed ordinances like this, doesn't mean that Brookfield must. I can see something like this being implemented regarding Airbnb facilities or units, but not long-term residential properties as proposed. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come up and make comments.
thank you for coming out tonight. Sir, on the end,
Robert Leitz, also an affordable housing provider to Brookfield. I don't have an eloquent speech to make. I'm going to appeal to what I hope is common sense. Somebody once wise told me, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's an awful lot of detail put into the presentation on those municipalities around us that have similar proposed ordinances. I would like to say I don't care what they're doing. I do care what they're doing because obviously people in those communities didn't speak up enough. I do care because I see no data in here to support why this is necessary. If there is public health and safety issues here that demand this, I'd like to know what they are, and I'd like to know if we presented a FOIA request, how many hundreds of thousands of complaints would be in those that would support something like this. if there's public safety and health issues with a residential unit, those same safety issues would apply to a single-family home. This part of my presentation, if you will, is the sarcasm part. This sounds great. I think we should do it for every unit, every housing unit, every residential, whether it's rental or not. I think you'd see where that would go to have everybody in the village think that this government is going to protect their public health and safety by requiring an inspection of their unit and requiring some more detail about who owns those units. That, again, one of the presenters already pointed out, is available through public knowledge. If there's enforcement standards that are not being met, again, can we please see the reams of detailed complaints where that's happened? And can we maybe attack those people who are not providing good housing rather than punishing those of us who are? The reliable database, I'm sorry, that's not our job to provide the database to the village. I believe that this should be done if you want to do it by yourself. It shouldn't matter to us. And those types of administrative costs are another tax. Whether it becomes neutral in inspections or not, it's not neutral to us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. Sir on the end in the green.
Hi, my name is Lenny. I live by Swan Cleaners. I was deployed to the Middle East this year. I earned the VA loan when I went there. I used that 0% down payment to purchase a rental property in Brookfield. I've been working to rehab it night and day while working my 9 to 5 to make it nice for my tenants. But taxes, utilities, insurance, and my mortgage payment is a lot. There's not a lot of room for extra. The proposed rental property ordinance will cost owners of rental properties $125 a year to register with the village, make them get yearly inspections of common areas, and inspections of tenant-occupied spaces every 3 years. A big point that I saw you made is that there's 20 villages in Cook County that have rental ordinances, but I'd like to mention that there's 111 villages total in Cook County, so it's less than 20%. I don't know if that was every one, though. I don't like this ordinance because, one, it adds a lot of work for an overburdened building department. It's already difficult to get them on the phone, get them to answer emails. Number two, adds a lot of room for corruption. If you don't think this happens in neighboring villages, you're being naive. It's very easy to pay an inspector. It's much easier to pay an inspector than it is to actually fix the issue. Number three, many of your landlords are not big-time landlords like myself because many of your buildings are under 4 units, 4 or under. This means that they use loans like the FHA or the VA loans, and $125 may not seem like a lot when you say landlord, but we're not the big guys, we're the little guys. Number 4, this targets good landlords who will potentially end up leaving Brookfield. Number 5, this invades privacy, property rights, and freedom of tenants and landlords. I don't remember the Constitution mentioning annual inspections and registration fees. Number 6, I'm kind of getting lost in my numbers. I don't know. I may have skipped 1 or 2. I don't know. There's an increased cost for landlords means an increased cost for tenants. So I guess I have 2 questions because I didn't see it on the slides here. Is there even an issue here? I mean, I know there's safety issues, just like there would be in any village. But how big is that issue? And my second question is, how will this solve that issue? I'd like to see statistics on both of those before you just pass this ordinance. Because as of right now, 90% of the people on your Brookfield Connections website do not support this and are calling it something like an additional tax in a way for the government to infringe on property owner and tenant rights. My recommendation is that if there is a bad landlord, then they should be dealt with, but don't go after good landlords because that creates entirely new issues. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. On this side, any more people on this side? Am I right? I'm short here, so I can't. Is there anyone else on this side? No, okay. Anyone on the left side that would like to make any comment on this topic? Okay, thank you for coming out. I'm going to let the board discuss a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. If you can come up to, no, please, you're on the side.
I know a lot's already been said. Jason Horn, I've been a 50-year resident of Brookfield. Thank you all. It's a thankless job, I get it. I've been on boards myself. Clarity is more what I was looking for. What truly is driving this? Is it the revenue? Is it the registration? And if that's the case, we're looking for registration, why do we need that every year? Once I register, wouldn't I be registered the second year or until the property is sold? So I think the revolving, coffer, I think it's excessive. I think we beat a dead horse at the moment, but I'm just looking for some clarity on what's driving this issue.
Again, thank you for coming up and making the comments. Yes, hold on, there's, sir, you can come up. I'll get you in the back right after you. Sir, if you can come up to the microphone, please.
My name is Nick Episcopal. I own a few buildings in town. I sided with everybody they've been talking about. I don't think we got any problem. Why we don't looking for the abandoned house in town? House that having grass high, couple feet or high. In my neighborhood where I live, been have a house that been abandoned for the last 10 years. I've been cut the grass. I've been making complaint in town with no result. If you're gonna go against all those few small owner, they own building, you should go against people, they don't take care of their property. Everybody, single home or apartment building. You can check how many complaints I've been making about the house. In my couple hours away. When I see no result, I've been cut the grass on myself because I don't like looking.
I understand.
If you look in Prairie Avenue, I can see 3-4 houses on the south side with grass to the side. What do they expect on doing? What you guys doing to avoid all the mess?
We did recently create an abandoned property registration. That was a new initiative we did, but we haven't been able to get everything yet. But I appreciate you coming forward. When you're done, I'm going to ask you to just give Libby your address and the address of the property that you're concerned about, and then you could give it to her privately, and we can go from there and try and follow up from there.
Other people we complain, if you're gonna go whatever other town doing in the neighborhood, in the area over here, like I can't stand the people leaving their dog poop all over the yard. Some of those towns, they have a registration for dog with some way register a dog with DNA or whatever they call. If you're gonna look at a small homeowner or the small investor, you should look at all those nuisance that we got all over.
Thank you. And Mr. Episcopal, if you could give Libby, I know, Libby, if you want to just get it now, if you can get the address just real quick, and then.
No reason, you got it on regular.
Okay, we have a lot of calls on record. If you could give the specific address, she might be able to follow up with you. I mean, that's all, because we do to get, sir, yes, you in the back with the hat? Sorry.
Hello, good evening. My name is Mike Healy, and I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here for a minute. Let's just say all these statistics were backed up by research that we can prove, and you convinced all of us that this is a good thing to do. There's two things that don't sit well with me, and I'm sure all of these other landlords. And I'm also sure, without even knowing all these people, that all the people that are here tonight are good landlords. We're people that already take care of our buildings and have no problem. You could come in and inspect any of my properties. You're not going to find a thing wrong with it. So that's not what bothers me. It's the logistics. I mean, I don't make enough money at these things to quit my day job. So I'm already busy besides taking time off to go watch inspectors and listen to tenants bitching that we're invading their privacy. So I don't want any of that happening. That's one thing. The other thing is, with the taxes and the insurance and the mortgage itself, you know, I don't own these things outright, even though they're all conventional loans, and I've put a lot of money down on them. You know, conventional loans. I still have a pretty decent-sized mortgage that the rents barely cover, if at all, and there's no way I can raise these rents anymore. They're already, I'm ashamed. I'm not really ashamed, but the thing is, I don't understand how some of these young people can pay these rents. But I have to charge these rents. And I'm not charging more than the average guy, but that's what it costs around here. And if this comes in, it's just gonna make the rents go up even more. And I just can't see it being a good thing for the market. It's just gonna mess everything up, and it could make tenants leave. It could make people, the word could get out, oh, don't even try for Brookfield. It's prohibitively expensive, or it's not worth it, or they're gonna be invading your privacy. God knows what young people are up to these days. They don't want you in their apartment. They don't want you in their lives. You know, and this town, especially where I try to get rentals, is near the trains here. You know, Brookfield has 3 train stations, and that type of person, they do not want anybody in their place. And that's all I've got to say, but nobody ever has mentioned, I don't think that we can raise these rents anymore. The one gentleman that's been here for 30, 40 years or whatever, I feel for him. I believe it. He took out a personal loan to do up his building for his tenants. So there's no more room for raising money here and putting more fees on it. That's all I got.
Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. Okay, anyone else on this side again? Yes, you on the end? Good evening.
What's B&F going to be charging for the?
I'm sorry, if we could just have your name for the
Oh,
record.
Ron, how are you?
Okay.
What's B&F going to be charging for the inspections?
That's an hourly rate thing that we work out, then we have contracts for them and other things. The financial decisions, the board will kind of evaluate and
But
go
it's
forward.
net zero, right? We're in the village, nobody's paying extra, no more taxes or anything with that? That's what was said earlier in the discussion.
That is the plan for it going forward. If that's the case, the board's going to discuss that further.
So B&F in Elgin is going to send someone here to Brookfield and inspect a building, file a report, and it's going to be less than $125 or $125?
The board will discuss that. I mean, that's a question the board has in going forward. We have other relationships with BNF. People from BNF are here.
Who's going to administer it within the village, this program? Because that's going to be an additional hire or more work for somebody who's in the village.
It's going to be more work for someone within the village.
And we have to pay them.
They're getting paid their existing.
So that's beyond the fees that are being taken in from
Yes.
it just doesn't seem like it's going to be a net zero thing. That's really all I have to say.
And I appreciate that. I think the board has some of those questions also, and the board has asked questions about that, and we'll address that. I'm sorry, I haven't been typically responding to comments. I just wanted to give you a chance to speak, so.
No problem, thanks.
Thanks for coming out. Anyone, I'm going to get to you in just a second. Again, there's going to be a chance for general public comment later on, but we have a couple more items after this. But anyone else on this side have anything right now? Okay, yes, thank you for your patience.
My name is Amy Kittle, and I'm a tenant in this neighborhood. I've lived in 2 different buildings. Both my landlords have taken exceptional care of my units. I also pay a fair rent compared to some other units in this area. I don't want that to go up. And I also, if something needs to be fixed at my house, I take care of it because my landlord is very good to me, so I'm very good to them. And I will never let some inspector come in my home. It's my home. My landlord does not come in my home. I've lived in my one unit for 5 years. They've been at the house once because we had a furnace issue. That's my house. I don't care if I own it, I rent it. That's my personal, that's my privacy. I don't invite people I don't want over. Why would I let an inspector into my home? I take good care of my place. My landlord takes good care of my place. And this is no fair to either of us or any other. I mean, if you're going to go for the landlords, go for everyone. Because.
Okay. I'm sorry, we've given everybody a chance to talk. Please don't shout out. Everybody just giving everybody a chance to talk, give you more chance, but shouting out from the audience just isn't appropriate, so I appreciate it. I'm sorry, let her finish speaking.
As I agree with all these landlords here. Right. So and I'm a tenant. I've lived here 10 years. I've lived 5 years in one place, 5 years in this other place. I love this community, but it's getting to the point too where if I don't stay where I'm at, I can't afford, I look at rents. They're expensive. My son's looking for a place right now. They're expensive, you know, and it's no fair to our tenants' rights. I would never let an inspector in my home. End of story. So, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Anyone else on this side for now? Okay. At this point, again, as I explained, this is not up for a vote tonight. I'm going to open it back up. If the board has any other comments or questions or additional information you want from staff, because we're not voting on this tonight, I'll look for a consensus about what we want to do next. But based on the public comment, does the board have any follow-up with staff or questions or conversation?
I have concerns with the inspection part of it. I mean, we've heard a lot of interesting points here. I mean, one of them is in terms of the registration. Once a building's registered, it's registered. And if we're doing resale inspections, upon that resale inspection, it would be re-registered, I guess. So for them to register each year, that's kind of interesting. But in terms of the inspections, I don't see this as being a revenue generator for the village. I actually seeing it being the opposite. Some of the points brought up, trying to coordinate a tenant and a landlord during the day, trying to coordinate our inspector and outside inspector, the time spent on this, the time spent administering this, assuming there are violations, there's going to be a tremendous amount of time following up on that and administering that. Certainly we want the town to be as safe as possible, but I'm not sure that this is the way to do it. And a lot of these comments are similar to what the Economic Development Commission was talking about. And to me, I think one of the comments that sums it up the best was from the last woman that said, "That's my house." That part bothers me. I mean, I don't want to see us become that with it.
Other comments from the board? Again, I'm not asking for a vote or anything tonight, just if there's any additional information or staff comments you want to make, and then we'll decide what to do next in terms of putting it up for a vote at a future meeting or something, so.
I agree with Trustee Ketchmark's points. Do we currently have any means, if a tenant wants an inspection of their unit, is there currently any way for a tenant to request that?
Well, that happens all the time under under code enforcement. So tenants will call, and then our inspector will go in and has entry into it. This is outside of that, the rental registration.
Sure. I think that, for me, that's the only way that I would be okay with a tenant's unit and the private spaces being inspected. I appreciate the idea of inspecting the public spaces, the common areas, the exterior, maybe not even an every year basis, maybe every 3 years for that. But I don't want to be inspecting tenants' private spaces, even on a random every 3-year basis. If there were a way to figure it out so that they could be inspected as the lease turned over, that might be a different story, but I don't know how we would manage that either.
Just to clarify that, I thought one of the things we were talking about before, that if a tenant did complain, we did not have the right, the authority to go into there.
No, when a tenant calls now, when they call our inspectors now, they have consent to enter for the boiler went out, HVAC, you know.
Okay, I thought we were talking about last time was that was part of the registration to give us the right to do that.
No. Right now, under our ordinance, an inspector can come in when there's consent and a tenant calls, whether it's a tenant or a landlord, or when somebody calls and there's an issue, you have the right to enter.
So then following through on that, what are we feeling that a tenant would have an issue with their building that they're living in and not want to complain about it?
Yeah, to that point, and at those, most of you weren't at the EDC meeting, we had our property maintenance inspector attend the EDC meeting. He's the one that goes in and deals with daily complaints that we get from tenants. Heat doesn't work. The electrical system is malfunctioning. My windows don't operate. I'm sure all of these landlords that are here tonight are very responsible, and that's great. I will say that all landlords are not, though, however. That we go into buildings daily where we're responding to a resident's complaint, and we're seeing things that are not code compliant, and then we act on them. We follow up on them. The reality is most tenants don't have any idea what the rights are. They don't think to call the village. They're probably afraid of the village. Nobody likes working with government, local government, and so there's a built-in bias against doing that. So we have no idea how many we don't hear from, but we know we're in buildings all the time where it's obvious these code violations have been present for a very long time, and we have no mechanism now by which to get in there and do anything about it until somebody complains. Yet you're dealing with perhaps a population that's not going to complain. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. One individual indicated, well, for the registration part of this is quite honestly will help us. And I agree, Trustee Ketchmark, this is not a moneymaker for the village. This is creating more work for the Community Development Department, and it probably is not going to be revenue positive to the village. It's going to be, and as somebody had said, it's going to be a burden. Not a burden that we're not willing to bear, but it's an extra responsibility that we're going to have to handle. But we feel strongly enough about it to protect the health and safety of residents to do it. But somebody had asked, well, on the registration part, just get that information from water bills or the county. Well, good luck with getting it from the county, because we tried that. It's very difficult. It's very inconsistent. Water bills doesn't work because in some cases, water bills go to individual tenants, not the landlord, not the building owner. And as we find out from being an adjudicator, there are cases, as the senior board members will know, we're in court for years sometimes trying to chase down people only to find out, well, darn it, you know, the inspector gave it to the building maintenance person, not the owner. That doesn't help us. By law, through the court system, we have to get to the owner. Water billing doesn't work because water billing, we do however the landlord sets it up. Sometimes the tenant pays, sometimes the landlord pays. So that's not consistent. The county assessor's office, that's just not reliable information. And so, you know, we're here basically to say.
I'm going to ask you one more time. You don't understand the acoustics of this room. We can hear everything, and I gave everyone a chance to talk. So just if you could keep the comments. Stop the comments, please. I'll give you a chance to talk again at the end of the meeting. And I know you're not trying to be rude, but we could really hear everything, and it makes it difficult to hear the person speaking, so thank you.
The last thing I'll say is, in a perfect world, we're not here presenting this. But we deal with reality, and especially Libby and her department, they see day in, day out the types of issues they're encountering, and they only encounter them now if we get a complaint. If you don't get a complaint, things will go on for years unaccounted for until something else happens.
But here, going back to that, because I thought we talked about this at the last meeting. If a tenant complains, the electrical system there is awful, they feel it's dangerous, whatever. Our inspector can go into that unit, the tenant would let them in. And then what happens?
Well, if
We
there's
deal with the landlord.
If there's a violation, it's always the owner of the building. So yes, if there's some type of violation or something that needs to be fixed, then a warning would be issued to fix that issue. And I did just want to follow up on what Tim was saying. We not only had our inspector come in, because we did take this to the EDC both in April and in August, both our village prosecutor came in too, because they're boots on the ground and seeing some of these cases that have been coming in. And the inspection trends here in Brookfield have indicated that there's a lot of deferred maintenance, meaning there's things that aren't being fixed. So we have seen an increase. This didn't happen in a vacuum. And there's a number of, cases or matters that have come up because they've been in existence for a while. So part of this is not waiting for a safety problem to occur, because the village does have a duty to protect the residents, and waiting for something cataclysmic to happen, and we've had some issues with properties, kind of undermines that duty to protect. So we want reactive enforcement, whereas before we don't want reactive enforcement. We've had reactive enforcement. We're trying to get ahead of it, so we don't have that. We can have safety. And it really protects the landlords and the tenants as well. And to Trustee Hendricks, to your question, this can be tailored if there is an appetite not to have inspections within interior units. It can be tailored to just the common area maintenance areas. So as other municipalities have enacted it, there's different ways that, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're not recreating the wheel, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. But the courts have been clear that the consent to have a rental registration, if you're going to enter into a unit to complete a very standard inspection, is acceptable. So that does not actually violate anyone's rights. Both the Illinois Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court have been very clear on that, including with Camacho, with C, and with some of the other case, Camacho and Camara. So that's already been well established and does not need to be relitigated on a municipal level.
On the duty to protect point, as some commenters have raised, I do think there's potentially a fairness issue in terms of there's likely issues in single-family homes all around the neighborhood, right, which are the vast majority of properties. Even based on our preliminary data on the rental units, it seems like maybe 2/3 of those are single-family residences. So what is the justification for us to go in if it's a rental property, we're going to go in there, inspect there and on a regular basis. But if it's not a rental property, then that is never inspected on a proactive basis until the resale hits. So it seems like we're penalizing the people who are renting, and there's not an analogous structure for the rest of the properties in the village.
Well, just to clarify, there is no inspections for single-family residences in Brookfield.
Right.
Some municipalities do have that. There's a higher turnover when you're dealing with the rental properties, which is why it's a rental registration. It's not an owner-occupied registration. So they're
Right.
two totally different buckets that we're talking about with that.
Right. I'm just
and the
saying, as we're thinking about this decision, that is a question what is our justification for doing this with rental properties, but not for other properties? Particularly, I mean, two houses could be near identical, right next to each other. We're not inspecting one of them because they don't have a tenant. Right?
We're seeing emerging trends with the rental properties. That's what the statistics are for.
And
But I'm sorry.
the point I would make, if it's an owner-occupied home, they're the victims of themselves. I mean, if they're not keeping their home and they own it, that's on them. What we're doing is trying to protect tenants who may not have a voice and may not have they don't own the property. There's a problem there. It's not being corrected perhaps. And so that's the difference between the rental and that.
Yeah.
Libby, are there examples of any municipalities that provide some sort of incentive or benefit to landlords? I'm a landlord myself, so I can understand their perspectives, but I'm wondering if there's some middle ground where you can offer some incentive for, relief of inspections after so many positive inspections in a row, or I'm not sure if there are any examples of that you've seen.
That's a great question, and we can tailor this. There are some municipalities, and I don't recall exactly which one, you can do an affidavit asserting that the property has been inspected and does pass all of the requirements. Like I said, those are life safety issues, so it's the inspection is similar to what a resale inspection would be if we did have it for residential as well. So that could be one type of incentive that is implemented.
Thank you.
On the administrative side, I know it's impossible for us to have a good estimate of how much this is going to cost because we don't have a good estimate of the number of units, and that's not our fault. It's not hard for me to believe that it's not easy to track down that information from the assessor or Cook County. But just thinking about, so if we went in the middle of 400 and 700, there's 550 buildings that we would be inspecting, common areas annually, and with a random in-unit inspection every 3 years. And then, as commenters described, that there's some sort of back and forth with tenants and then trying to schedule and get in, there's potential for additional follow-up just to complete one of those inspections. And we would be doing that in addition to the reactive inspections that we're doing right now, which would continue, right? Which you were saying is happening on a daily basis if a tenant raises a concern. So the fee, I know you can't give a clear answer because, again, we don't have the data, but I'm worried that this could become more costly than we're assuming right now, and a burden not just on staff, but then needing to hire contract staff to be able to meet the goals here, which are quite ambitious in terms of the number of inspections we're completing every year.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point to make. We've spent many, many months looking at this and also looking at what our workflow volume is in code enforcement and property maintenance, both through C-Click Fix, which is more of the reactive side of it, and then also proactively by having the zones and what comes through that, as well as what kind of comes in the winter months versus the summer months with that. So we have a really good pulse on what is happening with our workflow right now with one full-time inspector and then an additional contract inspector on that as well. So with this, it can be planned around the busy season would be summer. So we've emulated what some of the other municipalities do, which is to do some of the rental registration in the months between, say, October and February, similar to what we've already done with vacancy ordinance. So it is a pre-planned type of endeavor if we're going to implement this. So this is not something that can just be thrown together. We've spent many months looking at it and understanding what the actual workflow is for it, but also what the needs of Brookfield are as well. So that way we can be more proactive in getting this information. Up front, once we get the information, it's in there, it will be much easier because we're not going to be chasing additional information. Who's the owner? Did it go into a trust? Was it an LLC? Was it sold? Are the tenants being serviced properly? So like I said, this is something that we've seen with emerging problems that have existed and kind of a trend towards that, and we're trying to get in front of that.
I just had a question about, I'm also concerned with what Trustee Whitehead mentioned on just the time and logistics of what seems already like a lot of work for a small department. And this seems like doubling or tripling the work in my mind of how many properties you're trying to go to and coordinate. I did have a question about more on the complaint side and the complaint-driven piece. And you mentioned that, maybe people aren't trusting of government or that you can do this or what your tenant rights are. And if there's something that could be done more on an education campaign or education awareness of what tenant rights are. Sure. And what the village is able to do if there are issues at your unit. The other piece is, my other question is, with those complaint-driven system, who is paying for those inspections? So when we get a complaint and someone is coming out to the building, then who is covering the bill of that complaint-driven inspection?
The taxpayers are covering that bill. So there's a lot of time and energy and effort that's spent on that. So all of the administrative side is coming from the public coffer.
So the landlord is not then charged?
Unless there's a code enforcement, unless there's a case that's brought in adjudication. But if it's rectified, our goal is to have compliance. But to your first question as well, some of the municipalities, and Oak Park is one of them, they have a mandatory landlord workshop that has to be done. It could be done yearly or every other year. So that's part of understanding what tenants' rights are and how to be a good landlord. So that's certainly a component that can be added onto that. But yes, if there's a complaint and then there's a violation that goes, it's either fixed and there's compliance, or it goes straight to adjudication. And what we're finding is that there's more that goes into adjudication, and then it's not being fixed. And that's why our prosecutor did come in to talk firsthand as to what have we actually seen in the last year and a half. So these are real cases and real statistics as to what we're seeing, with our hearing officer and with our inspectors in adjudication and through code enforcement and property maintenance. So these aren't whole cloth made up scenarios. These are real cases that are coming before us.
Trustee Calusi, I may have misread you. Were you talking about an education campaign more tailored towards the tenants, that they were aware of their rights, that they could come forward, as opposed to educating the landlords? Was that?
I was asking about tenants, but
sorry.
educating
Okay.
landlords is a good idea also.
Because that's what something I detected, that, the fact that we do have some tenants that come to the village for support or concerns, I think is a good thing, but I would lean towards something where making tenants aware of their rights to file complaints with the village and the protections they'd have by doing so. I thought that's maybe what you were getting at, so.
We do, and when tenants call us, and we do get those calls pretty regularly starting in the winter months, we do direct them to different, to different helplines that could help them for their specific tenant rights if it's not something that the village is able to work on.
But I think maybe the point is that being proactive about the education for the tenants, making aware that there are services the village could provide, as opposed to them calling us and then we can direct them somewhere, maybe making them aware that the village can play a role if they're not getting satisfaction through their landlord.
Yes.
Can I go back to something Trustee Ketchmark was asking about? Is it the idea that people would register every year, or is the registration a one and done?
No, it's registering every year. So back to what Trustee Ketchmark was saying, when someone does the resale, that's only when they're selling a commercial property, so that doesn't actually address it. That's what we have right now. And we don't have, there's gaps in the records. So this would be an annual registration, and re-registering could be, there's no known change. So it's very simple. If there hasn't been any change in beneficial owners, LLCs, corporations, trusts, estates, all of those are components that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And have you seen where it's a one-time registration fee, and then the next year where you're just checking the box, you're recheck where there's no fee in the
We've
subsequent
seen
years?
different ones, so some where the fee is reduced, some where it's every other year, so it doesn't have to necessarily be every year. Some where it's just an annual registration with the regular fee, just to cover that administrative cost of actually maintaining all these records and files. And so it's kind of a cross-section of it between both DuPage, Cook, and Will.
I would be supportive of a hybrid approach. I appreciate the health and safety needs and the fact that we're already going out and inspecting a lot of these. I appreciate the idea of educating the tenants about their rights. I think I would like to see this with the private inspections removed, with scaled back inspections of the public areas, and then scaled back fees so that they're appropriate to cover the fewer inspections. I could support that.
So and just trying to get, if the annual fee is $125 per building, because, let's go back to the EDC's recommendation. If there's some support for just a registration only with no inspections, could staff put a appropriate dollar figure at what that would look like if the board supported the EDC's recommendation of just a owner registration requirement, and how often, how often that would be needed? I understand it could be done each year, but is it needed each year? I think the board has had some questions. If they register one year and the building isn't sold, is there a need for them to re-register and pay a fee again the following year, even if they're just indicating everything's the same? Eventually, if it's sold, there's clearly an inspection and fees for that. So could that fee be broken down as to because one of the recommendations from the EDC was just a registration-only component. And I'm not asking you to do it now, could you break down what that would look like in terms of what the cost of that would have to be if we did it every year, if we did it every 2 years, every 3 years, what would cover the expenses for that?
Yeah, we can certainly look into that. There can also be like the initial registration and then what you're talking about, which is like a recertification, that if there's no changes in it.
But
So
would there be a fee needed for a recertification each year?
There doesn't need to be a fee because that would be
Okay.
So,
Relatively easy.
Go ahead, trustee.
and to your point, I think it would maybe administratively be easier if everything was aligned on that three-year mark, right? Where
Right.
the registration recheck is every 3 years, and the rolling inspections are every 3 years.
Every 3 years. That's absolutely something that can be done. Because this can be tailored to exactly what would work. So it can be a 3-year registration. It can be just common area maintenance and exterior units. It can be a main registration with a recertification.
But I guess I'm always trying to get a feel for where the board is. I mean, the different options. I mean, it seems there'd be some support for a rental, possibly a rental registration ordinance with appropriate fees that might not have to be done every year if they could get a breakdown of that. But then I don't know, is there some board members that would support a rental registration and no inspections of even common areas? Or is there a desire to have at least common area inspections on some time frame? Would you like to see an option that has no common areas?
I think, I mean, I like the idea of some maybe less onerous inspection schedule with some kind of relief for landlords who, or for owners who perform well on inspections, I think is where.
Okay, but
what I
just
would
let's
support.
talk about if we're just, and again, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a desire to have some common area exterior, excluding the interior of tenant units, is there some desire, does everyone want to have some inspection of those on some time frame?
I'm interested in seeing what the cost of that would be, and I do not support it being annual.
Okay. Libby, again, I'm just trying to make your difficult job a little bit easier. I'm just trying to see if you can come back with some more. So if there was some possible tweak to the recommendation of having a annual registration with some inspection of common exterior and interior common areas with no tenants on some scale, maybe not as often as a year, what that would cost? Is that? No, I think Trustee Calusi is not saying have it.
Every other year or every third?
You're talking about common areas, exterior areas, no residential, no individual units.
No in-unit.
No in-unit,
Okay,
On
just
some scale.
common area and exterior.
But not every year.
not every year.
Every 2, 3? I mean, it can be any.
5.
You can tell me and I can draft it any which way.
Yeah. I'd love just to find a way that that does not cost us more money. And so what is the right, amount of time, staff time, the amount of time for landlords to be doing that? So I'm looking more like 3 to 5 for people that are not having any violations to begin with. I think there could be a different scale if there's continuous,
But do you want initially an inspection every year or one every 3 years?
not every year.
So why don't you come up with a figure for what every 3 years of common area with the registration requirement with once every 3 years of the common exterior area, what that would look like in terms of what we would need to cover the cost of that.
Okay.
And then, go ahead, Trustee Whitehead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, on the inspection point, the challenge I think we face there is you scale back the rate of inspection, then you're also scaling back the potential benefit. So, right, and this might be hard for staff to get, again, clear information, and, we're speculating here, but at what point, if we're only inspecting common areas every 3 to 5 years, how likely is that to identify an issue that then we can act upon in a timely manner that wouldn't be identified in some other way, right? There's just unknowns here, which is I think right now I lean towards the EDC recommendation of moving forward with establishing the program, unless we were able to get a lot more information on the inspections and we felt more confident about how that process would go, and I think that's challenging given the limited data we have.
Well, I was going to have Libby provide an option for the EDC recommendation, which is registration only, no
Yeah,
inspection.
yeah.
So that was going to be one option.
But there was 2 parts to that. It was no inspections and no fee. That was EDC's recommendation coming forward on it.
Right, theirs was just registration.
Okay.
Staff says to have an inspection and a nominal fee. And just with the numbers, if there's 700, assuming there's the max number of buildings, and it's on a triennial, so that would be about 700 divided by 3 years. We end up with 233 a year divided by 12, which would be 19 per month. That's eminently doable for 2 inspectors. That's literally just 19 per month for the inspectors to add on to their rotation of it.
I was just trying to clarify. So the EDC was recommending that we do registration and they recommend inspections, but no fee for them?
No,
No,
no
inspections,
inspections,
no
no fee. So
That's-
it was just a matter of having on record, the owner info, et cetera.
And that's what I asked, that was the first option, if I wasn't clear, that was the first option I suggest that we bring, what that, and what would that fee look like if the board wanted to go a registration-only component, no inspections, what would that fee, I assume it would be less than the 125 or 225 fee that we're talking about because we're not doing inspections. So that was one option. And then the intermediate option was registration with common area inspections every 3 years, what that would look like in terms of cost to cover. And then I guess we know what the most extreme option, which is the 5, we can come back and compare. I mean, would that be helpful for the board to?
Yeah, I think we need to see some of those other options, right? And you've heard a lot of questions tonight, which really, generated some more thought for us that.
What was
would
the
like to
third
see-
option, though?
The third option is the one you presented to staff's recommendation for tonight, I guess.
Oh, exactly, with the annual common area maintenance
Annual common
registration
area and random.
every 3 years interior.
Because
Okay.
the board knows what that option looks like. I guess I'm trying to give them the options of some other hybrids, or they could say, we don't want registration, we don't want anything. I just want to give them a chance to see what those things look like based on, the public comment tonight, their own questions, the experience of what we've had so far. So I know staff, EDC, everyone spent a lot of work. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight and giving the input of the landlords and the tenants. This is all helpful for the board. Let's do that and bring it back at a committee. Let's bring it back at another committee. If it's ready in 2 weeks, we'll do it in 2 weeks. If it's depending what the agenda looks like for everything else, this is obviously going to take some time. So we'll see. Is that okay?
Could we also could staff do some outreach if we're looking at using BNF or someone else, how their fee structure would work with this?
We can. We already use BNF for the
Right.
property maintenance, so we've got that fee structure. I can certainly plug that in as to if we're adding onto the workflow.
But would they charge an hourly? Because I know we have hourly rates. Will they charge hourly or will they charge per inspection?
They charge hourly.
Okay, so.
So
we'll figure that.
I can certainly run that because we do have them 3 days a week now.
That's what I was wondering too. Would there be a negotiating point if you were going to?
We can. For example, in the summer, there was more inspections, so we had the inspector more often, and then we had adjudication every week, and then we've scaled it back to just 2 times a month, so there's some leeway with that. And that was also to help us catch up with the vacancy ordinance, as well as Energize Ogden. So I can put some of that together. We've got those numbers.
Okay. All right, thank you, staff, thank you, residents, property owners, landlords, tenants, thank you for coming out. We still have other things, you're welcome to stay, we're going to talk about more things, but we're not making a decision tonight, we're not going to vote on it 2 weeks from now. We meet the second and fourth Monday at 6:30. You're welcome to come on this topic or any other topic. It's nice to actually have people in the audience. Thank you for your courtesy and patience tonight. Good luck with your shoulder. All right, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is discussion regarding proposed improvements to Prairie Avenue from 31st to Brookfield Avenue. Let me get my. Okay.
All right. Before I get started, I want to give a quick update on the Prairie Avenue lighting since it's related to this topic. As you probably all recall, we spoke about this in April. There was some interest in pursuing some streetscape improvements on the 3700 block of Prairie Avenue since we were doing, obviously, the 3700 block of Grand. Just to summarize that really quickly, we spoke about 3 different
Chief, I'm sorry,
options.
could you close that door, at least door, because I'm hearing people talking. I have really good hearing, I guess. Thank you.
Better?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yep, no problem. So at that time, the board chose to go through with just lighting improvements on Prairie Avenue as opposed to full streetscape or doing nothing and just waiting until we resurface it in the future. In August, the board approved an agreement with the same contractor that was doing the lighting on Grand to install pedestrian lighting from Brookfield Avenue north to the alley. I just spoke with the contractor last week. The poles are in. They intend to begin that work next week, and they anticipate that it'll take about 2 weeks to complete. During this time, the lights will be out. They'll be replacing the existing lights, obviously, so there will not be light. For that section, we will still have the lights that we just installed at the intersection. There's also a roadway light at the alley. So it's not like it'll be completely dark, but it'll be a little bit darker for 2 weeks than it is currently. And during the day while they're working, the parking along that stretch on both sides of the street will not be accessible. So I just wanted to provide that.
Have the business
Update,
owners in that
but-
area been made aware that the lights, I mean, it's getting dark earlier and it's dark in the morning, that they're aware that those lights are going to be out? I mean, it's obvious they have to be out while they're being replaced, but
Yeah, we're putting together a notice. I kind of wanted to give that update tonight, now that I've confirmed it with the contractor, see if anyone had any recommendations. But we would plan on putting a notice out either tomorrow or Wednesday so that they're aware of what's to come.
it'd be nice to get it done as soon as possible and, you know, for the holidays, have it lit up and everything else like that, so.
Yeah.
Safety lighting that will be out there for those evening times?
Currently, we do not have plans for that. I did look, it's about 250 feet from the intersection to the roadway light at the alley. Your typical residential block's about 600 feet, so if you have a mid-block light, you know, that's 300 feet. So it'll probably be about the same as like your typical residential block. Obviously, normally you want more light in a business district. For 2 weeks, you know, we can look into it, but I'm not sure that it's the benefits there to pay for temp lighting, so.
Okay.
Any other questions before I continue? Okay. All right, so I'll get into the main discussion. So I'm here tonight to talk about potential improvements to Prairie Avenue from Brookfield Avenue up to 31st Street. So just some background, in 2024, we applied to the Central Council of Mayors for federal funding through the Surface Transportation Program, or STP, for resurfacing improvements to Prairie Avenue, like I said, from 31st to Brookfield Avenue. The project was included on the Central Council's 5-year program, but I do want to note that that application did not include streetscape improvements to the 3700 block. It's just our typical roadway improvements. So after speaking with the Central Council, we do believe that contingency funding through the Surface Transportation Program would be available for in either fiscal year 27 or 28. The benefit there is if we could get contingency funding, then we would be able to not only have the improvements made prior to 2029, but we would also be able to add the streetscape improvements for 80% federal funding. This is a similar process that we've gone through with Brookfield and Grand, Burlington, several projects in the past. So that's kind of the goal here, is to discuss whether to pursue design engineering now so that we can hopefully capture contingency funding later. The scope of work, again, would be similar to a lot of our roadway resurfacing projects, improvements to the sewer system, drainage structures. We'd replace deteriorated sections of curb, sidewalk, and driveway aprons, install new ADA-compliant intersections and alley returns, pavement patching, pavement markings, and obviously a mill and resurface of the roadway pavement. The potential scope that we would add on if we get contingency funding would be similar to the streetscape that we have on 3700 Grand. It would include full sidewalk with the section of brick pavers behind the curb line, new trees and tree grates, lighting and new lighting conduit, and then new signage and pavement striping. A little bit of background on the financial implications of this work. Through the Surface Transportation Program, the village will be eligible for 80% funding for Phase 3. That would include construction and construction engineering. As with past STP projects, the Phase 1 and Phase 2, the preliminary and design engineering would be village cost. They would be 100% responsible for. So based on our preliminary estimate, with the streetscape involved, that would be a federal cost share of about $2.8 million and a local cost share of about $976,000. Some other capital improvements to consider as part of our long-term water main replacement efforts. The Public Works staff has indicated that there is a section of water main on Prairie Avenue that is in need of replacement. Before we consider any resurfacing projects, there's a section from Brookfield Avenue to Monroe. The intention would be to include that water main on the next water main improvements project in likely 26 or 27. As soon as we could get bypass funding through the IEPA. So the goal would be to get that done before any resurfacing happens so we can avoid any redundant work. During that project, we will replace all the lead services on that section from Monroe to Brookfield Avenue. And then for the section from Monroe to 31st, where the water main would not get replaced, we would install or replace those lead water services as part of the 2026 lead water service replacement project. So the goal would be to look at any other capital improvements projects that'll come up and get those done beforehand so that when we come in and do this project, we could, like I said, not have any redundant work and anything that would affect it. So in summary, the idea is that we would like to start phase 1 and phase 2 engineering so that we can capture any contingency funds that become available in either 2027 or 2028. This would allow us to start the improvements sooner than the 2029 programmed project with the SCP, and we would be able to get 80% funding for the streetscape improvements on 3700 Prairie. So any questions?
Okay, so let's deal with them one at a time, because there's two different proposals here. One is, should we do the preliminary and design engineering for the Prairie Avenue improvements, we'll just say from 31st to Brookfield Avenue, and trying to capture that 80% match. We know it's not automatic. We've had great success with that by being ready with the engineering and going forward and having the success in completing the projects. Questions from the board about that? Or, and I guess I'll just assume that if we're bringing it forward, that we have the match available, or we will be able to have the match available, whether it's 26 or 27 for the project, right?
Yes, yeah, I can't guarantee with 100%, but we have had those discussions with the central council. They feel that before 2029.
I mean the village's share. I mean the village's share.
Can I answer this question?
Tim, you take this one.
Doug
please.
didn't raise his hand.
Excellent question, President Garvey. We will, Doug Cooper is in the audience, and we will track this. I mean, everything Dan has said is what I think Derek said last year. This is our annual kind of process that we don't prejudge that you're going to approve it, but the board has been very aggressive at trying to pursue these contingency funding options to give us 80% funding. And so we kind of build it into our planning as we're looking towards next year and the year after that, find the 20%.
That was my question, does the design engineering, do we need to do that in this budget year, or are we budgeting it for 2026?
Yeah, the idea would be to budget it for 2026.
Gotcha. Thank you. I have a follow-up question related to the Cycle Brookfield AARP audit of both Prairie Avenue and Maple Avenue. Since those are both getting resurfaced soon, I wondered if that report had been completed and if Hancock Engineering received a copy of that report. I biked very slowly down Prairie and made many notes, and a bunch of other folks did as well, about things that could be improved for like the kind of accessibility and bikeability and walkability of that section of Prairie. And just want to make sure that when you're doing design engineering, that a copy of that report has been given to you guys.
Yes, yeah, we have not seen that yet, but that would be part of what we would coordinate with staff once we get going is, are there any bicycle needs? Are there any, do we want to install any bump outs based on, foot traffic? What would the streetscape improvements look like? Those would all be things that we would take a look at.
Well, it has one for Maple also, so if you're also still working or looking at that, there's There's a whole section that I think maybe Libby wrote down.
I wanted to go back to the funding. I know that we have been, over the years, been very successful in getting the STP grants and a number of other federal funds. And you mentioned the Central Council's got some level of confidence that we'd be okay there. But in the current climate where Illinois stands with the federal government, what's your confidence level as they're starting to pull funding from the city of Chicago for projects like transportation and things like that? Would that, I mean, I know you don't have any exact answer for this, but I think it's something we have to just put out there. What's, if the chances are we're going to commit to, what funding might come in 27 or 28? And I think I have some doubts.
Yeah,
Or I see risk at least, right?
It's a great question. We haven't heard anything from the Central Council of Mayors. I would think that they would put out a statement or some type of information if anything were to change. I know they just released their call for projects. I believe it was last week for this next cycle. Every 2 years, we reapply for all of our collector route programs just to keep them contingency funding eligible. But we can obviously ask them and see if there's anything that they're concerned about. But like I said, they did just release the new call for projects. So I would hope that if there was any concern, they would at least have delayed it or, made some type of statement to that effect.
Are they getting, I'm sorry, are they getting that funding ultimately from the federal government? Okay.
Question on the lighting, your first part. I mean, what's being done right now? It says we're doing the foundation for the lighting, and then part of, the next part is the lighting would be part of that, and we'd have 80%.
Yeah, so in the, just to be conservative with the estimate that I put together, I did include some roadway lighting going past the alley to replace the old concrete roadway
But this
poles.
lighting is something being done now.
Yes, this will be done in November, so upcoming, you can kind of see it there, the red lights that are shown. That'll be pedestrian lights that look similar to the ones that we've installed on Grand. So that'll be up to the alley where the main business area is. And then, like I said, as we go through design engineering, we'll talk about specific streetscape improvements, but I just wanted to put some cost in there for potentially some roadway lights or whatever is determined.
We discussed this several months ago. This isn't eligible for any, help, grant help in terms of these 6 lights that are being put in here, right?
Correct, yeah, and the discussion in April was, this is kind of the middle option where, you're putting some improvement to that area while also not having the full financial burden and hopefully going for the 80% at a later time to get the full streetscape treatment.
I want to just make sure I understand the financial impact of the options here. So the current plan is to resurface Prairie from Brookfield to 31st. Well, we would get funding for that in 2029 is the current schedule, right?
Correct.
And if let's say we were sticking to that schedule, we would obviously still have to complete phase 1 and phase 2 in advance, and village would be covering those costs as we get closer to 2029, right? So by moving up the whole project, we're moving up the lion's share of the village cost, right? But those are costs that we would be incurring in both scenarios, right?
Yes, yeah. From an engineering standpoint, the cost would be the same whether you did them now or, likely in end of 27 or early 2028 for the 2029 programmed amount.
And then you said the other difference is we're adding the streetscape improvements in this scenario, and that's not currently part of the schedule for 2029. What are the streetscape elements that are being added that would not be part of the work in 2029? And then if we stuck to the current schedule, we could then make that decision at that time if we wanted to add the streetscape improvements at 2029. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, I believe so. So the streetscape improvements, first portion of the question, it would be, like I said, similar to Grand, it'd be full sidewalk. So we'd put the strip brick pavers at the curb line, trees, tree grates, new signage, pavement markings, that similar, like I said, similar streetscape treatment. I believe you could go with the programmed funding in 2029 and ask for like an amendment with contingency funding to add the streetscape. It'd be something that we'd have to talk to the central council. It's not something we've done with the other 4 projects or so that we've done in the last few years where we've used program and contingency. Typically, when the contingency becomes available earlier on, we just take that full funding. So it'd just be something we'd have to ask. I think you'd be able to in 2029 potentially. The benefit here, I think by getting your design done earlier, whether it's this year or next year, whenever that does become available, you can capture it, and it's not always a guarantee that there's going to be enough money to do that full streetscape and add that on if you're just going for 2029, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if it becomes available in 2027 and we're still doing water main improvements, and we say, hey, do we think it's going to be there in 2028? Okay, we'll pass this year. We have that option because the plans are already created and it's project ready.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm just asking for more information. I'm generally supportive of the approach of trying to take advantage of the contingency funding and moving up the timeline of the project so that we can get these improvements in the downtown core as quickly as we can. And we don't think that, these costs it's not going to get any cheaper to do these improvements in 2 or 3 years on the engineering side and on the construction side, right? So.
Yeah, it's a good question. The only thing I'll add is that when we are doing these applications, so we're about to do the refresh them basically for the 2026 year. Every 2 years they do them. We can't, in the initial application, add the streetscape costs, but we found that they'll allow us to add the streetscape if the contingency funding, like the extra pot of funding, is available. So, in a perfect world, you would just apply for streetscape whenever it comes up and have it already programmed, ready to go. That's the only reason why it's kind of like a backdoor approach to adding the streetscape, so.
Okay, so is there consensus to move forward with the option of trying to get the contingency funding in 26 or 27 and to approve? I mean, we need a resolution to approve the design engineering, right? So, okay, well, why don't we put that resolution up for the phase one and phase 2? We need to do it both at the same time. Approve the resolution for that. Okay, so we could put that up. Now, I'm just looking at the packet. The second part of the recommendation dealt with the water component, right? Or is there a separate?
There's a separate item that would be the next item, but.
It's confusing because the staff recommendation is just repeated twice, but I think it's the same thing. I think
Yeah, that's because I just noticed in the packet, it's, it says page 6 of 8. That, okay, the engineer. No. Oh, did we? Okay. So the water work that we talked about in terms of doing the replacement of the possible sewer between Monroe and, was it Monroe and Brookfield Avenue?
Correct, yeah.
And then the lead service, so that's already been approved in terms of engineering, right?
Correct, yeah. All of the other capital improvements considerations that I mentioned, those have already been,
Okay,
they're
that
underway
was-
with design. That's all been approved. I just wanted to mention them so
Okay.
you guys know that we don't want to construct this next year and then replace the water main the following year.
Right.
Just some things to consider.
So there's a possibility that we would be doing the water main from Monroe to Brookfield Avenue on Prairie next year.
If we can get bypass funding, yes.
Okay.
Likely it would be either next year or 27, depending on when we can get bypass funding from the IEPA.
And I know scheduling is always subject to state and bidding and everything else. Like, just know that if there's any way to avoid the intersection of Prairie and Washington being closed for that work during the school year, if there's any way to do it, when it's not, I mean, that's the main route to and from Riverside Brookfield High School. A lot of these projects are beyond our control. I know it has to happen. The construction season is only X number of months long, but if there's any way planning that you could avoid having, because obviously a water main is going to have to go all the way down. It's going to be a lot of work. If it's possible, if not, we'll go back to the rerouting people down our brand new Brookfield Avenue and things like this. But know that from mid-August through, the rest of the year, that Prairie and Washington is the main route for most people to get to Riverside Brookfield High School from Brookfield, so.
Yeah, and we've used that as when we spec the project out, we'll put restrictions if for Maple next year, when they're doing Lincoln, we put restrictions where it makes it a lot harder to do it not in the summer so that they can do it while school's out. We do a similar thing with whether it's the water main or whether it's the resurfacing, make it a lot more difficult for them to do it during school hours to incentivize them. We can't tell them no, but we can incentivize them to do it during the summer.
Okay. All right, so that's all you need from us on these two tonight, so, okay. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. All right, the next item is a discussion regarding the new 26 and 27 low-interest Illinois IPA loan for lead service. When we created the lead service replacement plan that we came up, we talked about how this was going to be done in phases and how we were going to finance it. We approved an initial water rate increase to cover the initial part of the project. We knew we were going to have to come back for the second half, so the board has a very detailed memo, but I'm going to turn it over to Derek from Hancock Engineering to make a presentation on what the recommendation is going forward.
Thank you. Good evening. So here tonight to give an update on the lead water service replacement program. And then also we've been in contact with our EPA project manager, and we want to discuss an opportunity to pursue some additional bypass funding for lead service replacement. So quick update. These numbers that we're showing keeps changing slightly. We still have a few unknowns in the system, but it's fairly close to what we started with a number of years ago. And ballpark current numbers are, we have 3,043 total lead water services identified. And as everybody knows, the village has been aggressive, fortunate with the funding, and has replaced 1,593. So we've already replaced over half of our services in the first 3 years. And we have 1,450 remaining lead water services. We did put in a funding nomination form in March of 2025. We did not make what they call the intended funding list. Those are the projects that are awarded money, but because we have all the bidding documents and other documentation that the finance department puts together is already completed, we're eligible for bypass funding. And if you could switch over, the EPA is, in our discussions a week or two ago, they indicated that they have over $40 million in bypass funding available. And we've talked about it, but just a quick reminder, bypass funding is people that are awarded the EPA loan funding, but they end up turning it down for one reason or another. What's going on now is a lot of them are qualifying for the principal forgiveness, and they receive a portion of the loan for principal forgiveness, and they receive the rest of the loan as the 0% interest over 30 years. We have not qualified for principal forgiveness, and we don't anticipate we will unless they drastically change the rules on the low to moderate income requirements. So we have this year, the EPA has a lot of money in bypass funding available. We're recommending or proposing, at least for consideration, that the village may go ahead and replace all of its known lead water services, which is 1,450. Less, we may not include in this current project the lead services associated with the 26 water main project and the 27 water main project. We're trying to get bypass on 26 right now. It's uncertain whether there'll be bypass funding for the water main. That's a separate pool of money from the lead services. And then, of course, the 27 water main project is what Dan just presented. That's why we're trying to get a design engineering agreement this fall, next meeting possibly, and then we'll be in position around June, July, or August with a complete design permit in hand, and we would go after bypass funding. Those services we will include in our lead water service application if the village chooses to go. I just prefer not to do them. They say we have 3 years to go ahead and replace these lead services if we get the loan, the bypass funding. So we'll include those conservatively.
So include those 130
the 130, but we'll hold off doing them until the water main gets installed, okay? Did a quick estimate, well, not quick, this is a detailed estimate of cost. We're estimating between construction and engineering, we have about $24,500 left. $24,500,000.
I'll take the first one.
Little sticker shock, sorry. As a reminder, again, the terms are 0% over 30 years, same as we've had on the first two loans. And Doug, and when I'm done, is going to come up and discuss the financial impact later in the presentation. Okay, I want to talk about a planning issue. So if you noticed, I had underlined all of the known lead water services. We have 1,450 services identified as known. However, when we go in, and Tim, can you flip one more? Yeah, this is a picture of the water meter inside, and to the left, I know it's not easy to see, but that's the piping that runs from the water meter, goes through the concrete floor, and then that goes out to the parkway and to the water main in the street. What I wanted to express to the board is this short little piece of pipe to the left of that water meter is how the identification was made, so whether it's a copper or lead water service. During our first 2 years of water main improvement projects, we expose all of these services. So if they were identified copper, but they're let out by the B box, we discover that. And what I'm showing you, if you go back one slide, please, is in our newer areas, which are north of 31st Street and south of Shields, rough approximate areas. About 5 to 10% of the services identified as copper have been identified. They've been found to be lead water services. So we replaced those with we've captured all of those, and the lead services have been replaced. In the older areas of town, between 31st Street and Shields, it's been about 20% of the services identified as copper, but they've been found to be lead services. We don't know that that's definitive representation for the rest of the village. We think it's the best information we have. So when I say that this additional funding would replace all of the known water services, there still may be some lead water services out there. If we can go 2 slides ahead. So the question is, how do we deal with those, what we call unknown water services? Well, the village has met its legal responsibility and quite frankly done what, as far as I know, just about all the communities in the area are doing, is they've done a visual inspection at the water meter to determine what the private portion of the water service looks like. And this is part of the Lead Line Replacement Notification Act, and it states that nothing in the section shall be construed to require service lines be unearthed for the sole purpose of inventory. The EPA recognized that'd be costly and maybe an unfair burden on the villages. The villages certainly have the option of doing that, but the EPA in there, when this statute was adopted, they identified that excavating the surfaces outside is not required. So what are our options for some of those future lead water services that may be encountered, and when would they be encountered? One is on water main replacement projects. I've identified that we come across all of them, so future water main projects will proactively identify all of the lead water services that are out there on the street. And there may be some one-time material determinations. That could be a leaking water service that is identified as copper, and when the repair is done, it turns out to be lead. The other option, and my recommendation would be we consider option 1 here, but option 2 would be to go out and excavate. There's approximately 3,600 services identified as copper. For the village to excavate those on the private side of the B box to confirm what the material is on the private side, it's about $1.5 to $2 million. And even if we have that excavation at the private side of the B box, and it says copper, and we identified it inside as copper, there's no definitive determination of what the rest of that service is. In other words, it could have changed to lead service. There really just isn't a way to excavate that whole service up. So I don't know that the village wants to be that type of proactive to go out and excavate all these services, because we suspect there may be some additional lead water services out there. I did discuss some funding options. So how do we fund? If we go after this $24.5 million and take the loan and do all of the remaining known services in 26 and 27, what do we do in the future if we come across these lead services? If there are enough lead water services, for instance, on a water main project, I would recommend that the village go for another small IEPA loan. It might be $1 million to cover the lead water services on a water main project. If we encounter a handful, if we encounter about 5 to 10 leaking services that were identified copper, turn out to be lead, we do have some lead water service reserve funding, and that's probably the way to go rather than going for a loan for just a small amount of services. And I mentioned here that Doug will go over the rate increase that we've anticipated for getting the $24.5 million to replace all the known services. There is some money, I believe, left in the reserve right now, but in the future, depending on how many lead services are encountered over the years, you may want to consider smaller rate increases to our lead water service rate to cover those costs. The last part, I just want to make the board aware. I mean, so I'll go over the recommendation. The recommendation from us is, since we don't think we're going to get the loan forgiveness and the cost of the lead water service replacement will go up, we think that the terms of 0% over 30 years, same as our strategy first 2 years, we're recommending the village at least consider going after requesting the $24.5 million, replacing those remaining known lead water services over the next 2 years.
How does so that first recommendation, how does the board feel about going after the contingency funding for the $24 million?
Was Doug going to present on?
Well, I guess.
Yeah, I had questions just on my portion. Maybe they're better if we wait
Yeah,
to the end.
because then, I mean, the question of how we pay for it, yes.
So does this have to be turned on? Turn this on. Is it? Okay. So we had talked about the how much it would cost to effectively pay off the principal on this loan over the 30 years for the $24 million. And the dollar value for the entire amount is going to be about, I think it came up was, it ended up being, you'd have to increase it by $1.50. Right now, and that would be just the lead service component rate. If you look at that chart there, the water rate that we have for the village of Brookfield is divided into a number of components. One is a capital component, the non-capital component, which covers our operating costs. One is the capital component, which covers the lead service removal, as well as the capital improvements, which is the water main replacement. So right now we charge $16.29 per 1,000 gallons. As we look to getting this $24.5 million in IEPA loans, we would need to find a way to pay those off as they come due. So what we're talking about doing is taking that rate increase that would be necessary, which was the $1.50, and splitting it up over basically 3 years. So the actual rate increase only applies to the lead water service replacement program. So even though it says, I think it was like 90% rate increase, it's really only on that one component. The 166 goes to 216, goes to 266, goes to 315 per year. So if you look at the very bottom, the dollar increase, and this does also include a 2.5% annual operations increase for cost of water and other stuff. So if you take those two components and you calculate them on the rate, we go from $1.66, which we're currently charging, to the 216 and the 2.5%, which then makes the dollar increase for that first rate increase only 66 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's a 4%, ends up being a 4% rate increase. And I schedule it out over 3 years at that rate. So if we do it this way, or even we can stretch it in further, depending on when these loan payments come due, the maximum I can see would be about a 4% rate increase overall for each of the next 3 years.
Questions from the board about the funding mechanism that we're talking about?
And then I was just going to show this one real quick too. So right now, that green is where it's 1629. If you go back to that other one, so the 315, I'm sorry, the 1827 would be the final rate in the third year. So 1827 compared to where we're at there, it's on the high end, but I'm assuming that the other municipalities will also be looking at raising their rates too.
And just to talk about it, I mean, those other towns, I mean, we made the choice as a village to replace the resident service line. Other municipalities chose the option of replacing the lead service up to the box and then what's considered the private part. Other municipalities chose to have the residents pay for that. We decided to have a water rate increase, and so the residents do not pay out of pocket for the lead service replacement. Derek, are you familiar with some towns that have chosen to have the residents pay for the lead service?
I know there's discussions. I don't know that some of them haven't arrived at their policy yet. I would like to point something out. First of all, when we did come here back in 2022, we were projecting a total increase. We adopted $1.66 per thousand, and we thought that was about a third of what we were going to need. We thought we'd need about $5. It did come down because the village, there's a few reasons, but the large loans and large projects we've done, we've seen a nice economy of scale on these. Got incredibly good bid prices from the contractor that's done the work the last 2 years. And I don't know, but I would suspect, because I don't think the other villages are far along as us with our lead service replacement, I don't think they have we're comparing our rate with the full lead replacement costs in it. Like the one that they may not reach for 17 years, Brookfield already had, when you're gonna compare us at $18, that we should only need minimal increases after that for our lead line. So that's an interesting chart. It seems to me like our rate's very competitive based on that.
That was going to be my question. I think that per the law, all that was due by 2027 was having an inventory. And then you have to start a replacement to finish that replacement by a particular year, and we might have all of them replaced by 2027.
Just for clarity, 24 for the inventory, but 27 is the first year you have to start replacing. So in other words, some of these may not have added anything in for the lead service line replacement. And I'd be very confident saying none of them, if we're comparing what our final rate would be, none of these have a component for all of their lead rate replacement.
And some of them may choose to have the residents pay out of pocket for the lead service. So they might not raise their water rates to pay for it, but they might have the residents. And the average, what's the average cost to our homeowners if they had to replace out of pocket?
Probably about 10 grand for the private portion.
Okay. So none of us want to increase water rates. I mean, those that were on the board back in 2022, we were told that to finish the project as we envisioned doing all the lead service, that we would need close to a $5 total rate increase over the years, and now it's come back better than that for the reasons stated by Derek. So,
and if I could just compliment the board and Hancock, the board has been aggressive about this and recognizing the public issue here, the public health issue, and said we have to get out in front of this. All right, staff, make this happen. Hancock proactively went after. When we first started this in 2022, we were looking at the ideal would be loan forgiveness. We looked at IEPA loan forgiveness, what an option that would be. Well, we soon figured before all these other towns even applied, we did apply for loan forgiveness, and we just don't really qualify. The type of towns that are getting loan forgiveness aren't in our demographic. So then we pivoted immediately to the next best option is 0% interest. And we aggressively went at it before many other towns in the state have even tried. The beauty of this is when we're done in about 2 years with replacing all of these, we're now done. We don't need to go after more IEPA. Meanwhile, other towns throughout the state that are going to then apply for IEPA no interest loan, that loan money may be gone. I don't know. I hope not for them, but for us, we'll be done because the board's been proactive, Hancock has been proactive, and we've worked together to make this happen. And we've had great contractor bids, pricing, in the board. If you remember, I think last year we added to, I think in 2 years in a row, we added to the contract because we had good pricing. We had a good bid for 2 years in a row. We added to the program to be a little bit even more aggressive.
I appreciate the attention to the cost issue, which also our residents are benefiting from having higher quality water sooner, right? And who knows, what risks, if we had delayed, what risks that would have introduced, so.
So 2 additional points to Tim. So when we actually are applying for loan forgiveness. You don't have to apply, it's just whether you qualify. So every application we're considered for it, and we just haven't made it. That's why I say I don't think we're going to make it. And when you look at the communities that do make it, there's a gap between us and them that I don't think will be closed. I want to talk a little about the bypass funding too. In talking to the EPA project manager, this may be the last year we see large amounts like this of bypass funding. And because what I referenced earlier, a lot of the communities are turning down the zero interest funding this year. However, next year they have to start replacing. So more and more of them are going to start taking that funding or have to take that funding. So I'm not saying there won't be any, but if we chose not to go after this, we may not be able to get bypass funding in large chunks like this. So something to consider.
Did you mention before there might be other communities also trying to get this? So is there a likelihood that we would be able to get the 24?
And speaking to our project manager, again, Brookfield has a good reputation with them because we've asked for the money and spent the money. They know that the town knows what it's doing. Yes, they feel it's likely. If the board gives its approval to pursue this, we're going to file the paperwork. Doug's been working on it in anticipation of it. We would try to file by the end of this week, and it's a first in line type of thing. So we'd be submitting by end of week to go after this funding. And I'll say this, and the board has the option, you can get the loan agreements and turn them down later. You're just committing to go after this funding at this point. We're looking just for a consensus to pursue the $24.5 million.
Is there anyone that thinks we shouldn't apply for the contingency, which requires us to make the loan application, and knowing down the road how we'd have to pay for it, we'd have to then go through the process of the rate increases in 26 and 27 water rate increases. But the initial thing, as Derek said, the sooner we get in line, the more likely we get to the contingency funds that's available that might not be available in coming years. So is there anyone that thinks we should not go forward with the application?
No, and I appreciate Doug's proposal of raising how we pay for it in an incremental way instead of all jumping in the first year.
And that'll be action, and I agree, and that'll be action we'll have to take. We'll actually have to vote on water rate increases going forward to finance these. And I just want to remind, this was the original plan in 2022. It's actually better than the original plan in 2022. The board members that voted on that increase back then knew that if we were going to, I don't think anyone envisioned that we were going to be able to go this fast and be this successful, that there would be additional water rate increases greater than what's anticipated here. And I want to emphasize, at the WCMC meeting and the executive committee meeting that I attended, one of the legislative priorities of the WCMC executive committee is to seek assistance from the state and federal government for lead service replacement programs. A lot of these municipalities are asking the legislative committee to make it a proposal to ask our state and federal legislators for money so they could start their lead service programs. And as a member of the executive committee, I'm fine with supporting that as a we will not be taking advantage of that money if it comes, if and when it comes from the state and federal government, because we'll be done by then, so. So, Derek, go ahead with the application. Thank you for bringing it forward. Appreciate it. Dan, thanks for your help. Doug, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the items we have up for discussion. Before we go into executive session, I'm going to open it up again to public comment. Yes, sir, if you stuck around, you get to ask some more. You can just give us your name again. I know you spoke earlier.
My name is Robert Consul. 3 compliments. Number 1, I'd like to thank President Garvey and the entire village board and staff and everything for allowing all the landlords to express their comments on the proposed registration fees and everything. It's a big issue. It affects all of us and everything, and there's a lot of good landlords in the village. I hate to be lumped in with the bad ones and pay extra because of their neglect and everything like that. So I do want to appreciate, all the time you allowed everybody. You didn't put time constraints on them for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Everybody had a fair say. So I sincerely really appreciate you hearing all our comments, and I appreciate all the back and forth discussion you went on for like over an hour, 10 minutes on the topic. So I really appreciate that. I really like the See Click Fix program. I've used it 4 times already. 2 of the 4 things have been resolved already within several weeks or whatever. I do appreciate it. It helps keep the alley in my building area clean with ruts and everything, overgrowth in the alleys and everything. I think the program's working, and I really do appreciate that you're really seem far ahead than a lot of other villages in that. As I mentioned, I lived here for 13 years. I moved to LaGrange Park, just 4 blocks away from my building originally where I lived. The other thing too, I live on, my building's on Blanchard, just finishing up the lead water service line replacement on Blanchard. It was a huge project all the way from Lincoln all the way to Southview. I really want to compliment the village of being so proactive with everything, taking advantage of the funding and everything that's been available. I was there every day that they were doing the work. The contractors were exceptionally good, very helpful, explaining what they're doing, allowing me to let the tenants know what was going on. There's minimal water line service interruptions and everything. The whole process was so smooth and so uniform that right now there's watering the sod and everything. So I want to compliment the village as being so proactive. I'm in LaGrange Park right now. And they literally just imposed a lead water line service fee on the residents in May of this year. So they're just getting their feet wet in this whole thing. That's why I kind of stuck around for this discussion now, that you guys are really so proactive and moving so far ahead on this issue. To be done in 2 more years, 3 more years is really exceptional. So I do really appreciate it. My other buildings on the other side of Ogden, I think I'm scheduled for next year. But the process was so smooth. They ran into some snags. There was a kink in the line. They had to regroup, rethink how they're going to reconnect the lead or the new copper service line in my building. But the ideas they came up with were exceptional, and I really do appreciate the work that they've been doing also. So my 3 compliments. I do thank you so much.
Well, and I thank you for sticking around to give compliments. You sat through a lot to give us compliments, and I appreciate that.
This was a very good discussion because the lead water line, it's a big deal. And like I said, we're so far behind. You guys are so far ahead on the issue. It's really amazing. So
well, thank you very much.
Compliments for the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else on the side? Brian, you want to say something to the microphone? No. Anyone on the left side? Okay, that ends the public comments. We do have an executive session. So at 9:05, I'd entertain a motion to temporarily recess the committee of the whole meeting to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific village employee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to go into executive session and to temporarily recess was made by trustee Kaluzny, second by trustee Gahuli. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Whitehead?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks? Trustee Naramatsu?
Aye.
Trustee Kahuli?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 9:05 PM. I do not anticipate any board action coming out of executive session. So anyone not involved in the executive session